Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Today I've come to Cambridgeshire to embark on a journey that will see us travel from Huntingdon to Cambridge and then on to our final destination of Duxford. To help navigate our way there, we'll be using, of course, my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps and my brain. What could go wrong? We start then in Huntingdon, today a town with over 25,000 residents, but according to my guidebook 100 years ago, that figure was far less at nearer 4,000. Indeed, if we take a look at the old map provided by my guidebook, sorry about the dodgy scan, we can see that Huntingdon was a completely different town to what it is today. So what remains of my guidebook's version of Huntingdon? Well, it suggests we pay a visit to Huntington Grammar School, which isn't as weird as it sounds. Situated on what used to be the main road through Huntingdon is the only surviving building of an old medieval hospital built in the 12th century. After the hospital's closure, it was converted into a school where in 1640 a chap called Samuel Pepys would attend. This guy was made famous by keeping a diary that documented his life between 1660 and 1669. Highlights include the Plague, the Great Fire of London and the Second Anglo-Saxon War. Life was so much better in the old days. The school would close, or rather move to another location in 1896, leaving the building unoccupied for some years until 1962, at which point Huntington Council took over the building and turned it into the Oliver Cromwell Museum. Why? Well, Oliver Cromwell was born in Huntingdon and attended the grammar school. Who is Oliver Cromwell? I'm not really sure. If only there was some sort of place that I could go to find out. If we were following my 1923 guidebook's map, we'd head down High Street to leave Huntingdon. However, a lot of it's been pedestrianised, so we're going to have to divert around. In either situation, though, we'll be crossing over the Old Bridge. Built in 1332, Old Bridge allowed a quick connection between Huntington and Godmanchester over the Great River Ouse. Being so old, it was designed with horse-drawn traffic and pedestrians in mind, and across the bridge you'll find refuge areas for pedestrians to avoid larger vehicles. However, in more recent times, a separate pedestrian bridge has been built, as it's clearly the safer option, with cars now using the old bridge. It's just a shame that the new pedestrian bridge looks like shit. Having crossed the bridge, we arrive in Godmanchester, where my guidebook simply suggests timbered houses as something to look at. I'm not exactly sure which timbered house it's referring to, because there are several in Godmanchester, all of Tudor origin. The best example probably is known as Tudor Farm and is found on Erning Street. It was built in 1600, although saw some restoration work in the 1990s. Today it lives on as a private residence. To continue our journey, we'll be picking up the A1307. Originally this was known as the A132, but was renumbered to the A604 in 1936. Following some major upgrade work, it would then later become the A14 for a bit before being renumbered to the A1307 following the construction of a new A14. It's all unrecognisable from how it was back in the day, but there is a small section of the original road and route to be found just up by the Godmanchester Interchange. Today it's called Cambridge Villas, but back in 1923 it would have been the main road in and out of Godmanchester, numbered as the A132.
Well, here's a thing. I've just had a power system error come up on my drone, which my Googling suggests it's game over for the drone. So for the rest of this episode, there is no drone flying.
We'll be following the course of the A1307/A14/A604/A132, which will take us straight into Cambridge. But before we get there, I wanted to make a stop and look at a couple of service stations. Starting with Swavesey Services, where once upon a time we'd have found a Little Chef and a petrol station. It opened in 1985 and life was sweet up until around the year 2000, at which point Cambridge Services, a much larger service station, would open just over the road, and they took a lot of the customers away from Swavesey Services. As if that wasn't bad enough, the A14 was later upgraded, making access to Swavesey Services a complete arse, so perhaps predictably the business dropped off to the point where it all had to close. However, I'm pleased to say that the Little Chef restaurant lives on by way of Herbie's American Diner. It's a family-run independent business and it's bloody brilliant. Just up the road from Herbie's is Lulworth Services. This one hasn't done so well. Again, a former Little Chef and petrol station, but it was older than Swavesey Services, having opened in 1968. The Little Chef would later be turned into a Burger King, which would survive up until around 2017, at which point plans were announced to widen the A14, and in doing so, access to the site would be removed, so it was all closed down. Today, it's all still sat here, its condition worsening as the years go by, and every time I drive past, I can't help but feel sorry for the place. Still, it's probably not going to be long until it's all burnt to the ground as part of somebody's insurance fraud scheme. Next up is the Girton Interchange. If we compare old with new, we can see that things have changed an awful lot since the days of my guidebook. We need to follow the A1307, which has been diverted around somewhat as a result of the interchange. Following the previously mentioned A14's widening, the Girton Interchange was modified extensively, and because of that there's now an abandoned slip road available for us to come and explore, a particularly nice feature of which is the concrete bridge, which today serves no purpose at all. We arrive in Cambridge shortly after. In the days of my guidebook, a busy city with a population of around 60,000. Today that's risen to 145,000, or 213,000 if we include the surrounding suburbs. They're not particularly fond of the motor car here in Cambridge, and indeed it always feels like I'm stepping behind enemy lines when I visit, but I do enjoy the fact that Cambridge Council spent a load of money on one of the shortest lengths of double yellow lines and smallest roundabouts, all completely pointless, and Cambridge is full of punts. My guidebook isn't really interested in silly road infrastructure and suggests that we take a visit to see Senate House. It's part of the University of Cambridge. Apparently Cambridge does education, and it was built in the 1720s. It's a grand structure indeed, but it fell victim to a prank carried out by students in 1958. What they did, for no reason at all, was winch an Ep.7 motor car onto the building's roof. The vehicle allegedly was an abandoned car found 5 miles away, which they towed into Cambridge before removing the engine and axles to make it lighter, and then they set about putting it onto the roof of the building. It took the authorities a week to remove it. Before we head out of Cambridge completely, I wanted to stop by a place that I discovered a couple of years ago that I think is a bit of a hidden gem. This is Cherry Hinton chalk pits, a nature reserve buried within an old chalk pit. The quarry dates back a good few hundred years, and the chalk and lime that was extracted here was used to build Cambridge University colleges. The pit I'm standing in was operational until the 1980s, at which point it was closed and turned into the nature reserve that we see today, and being surrounded by the steep chalk cliffs makes it that little bit more of an enjoyable walk.
Well, as luck would have it, mine's anyway.
Detour complete, let's get out of car-hating Cambridge, and our journey takes us off the A1307 and onto the A1301 through Great Shelford. Back in the old days, this road was known as the A130, which today you'll find in Essex. I don't know what happened there, but if we were to follow the old road route, we'll need to take a left onto Cambridge Road, which takes us into Sawston. Sawston is a small village that for many years was home to the leather, tanning and paper industries, and indeed to this very day there's still a leather factory operating in Sawston. What isn't operating is the now abandoned Sawston paper mill or factory. It opened in 1871 and employed 400 people, which at the time was about a third of the population of Sawston. Intentionally situated next to the River Cam, the river was used to drive some of the machinery on site, and it had its own private railway siding that featured a bridge to take the railway over the river, and that's still in place today. We're going in search of another bridge now, because as we leave Sawston, just off of our route lies a small stretch of abandoned road that used to be part of the A505. On our old maps we can see Whittlesey Bridge marked out, and it's that bridge that I'm hoping to find. The thing is, I don't think it exists anymore, but we're not going to find out standing around here, are we? So, come on.
I see something through the trees. I'm not going to get my hopes up, but there is a structure of some description. Well, we've definitely found what's left of Whittlesey Bridge, but it's fair to say, yeah, it's gone.
A short distance from our non-existent road bridge is the village of Duxford, the final destination on our road journey. My guidebook has no listing for Duxford. Clearly it's not an interesting enough place, and indeed that's still the case today. If it wasn't for the Duxford Aerodrome, or RAF Duxford, we'd most likely have never heard of it. Duxford Aerodrome was constructed in 1917 and initially would operate as a training airfield until 1923, at which point it was reclassified as a fighter station. During the second small disagreement, squadrons of Spitfires and Hurricanes totalling at least 60 aircraft would fly from Duxford as part of the Battle of Britain. The plan was to intercept enemy bombers and aircraft before they reached their targets. In 1951, the airfield would have a 6,000-foot solid runway built, only to have it shortened some 20 or so years later as a result of the M11 motorway's construction. Apparently, the last aircraft to land on the solid runway was a Concorde, which now resides at the Imperial War Museum on the airfield, where it will have to stay because the runway is no longer long enough for it to take off. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. As you can see behind me, I had a pretty awesome drone outro lined up for this episode, but yeah, that's not going to happen. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care, bye-bye, bye-bye. Oh, I'm so unfit. Jesus Christ. Oh, I've got to walk back now. Jeez, man. I'm fixing the drone.